One of the most entertaining and interesting chapters in the book for me was the one on pleasure. And I wanted to ask you to say why we do so many things which are bad for us. That we seem to be irresistibly drawn to things that ultimately will do us harm.
Well, I like to say that the most uniquely human emotion is chagrin. Like lots of species feel happiness and sadness and so forth, but we're the only species that can make some long-term plan, like I want to, get better grades, I want to lose weight or whatever, and then abandon those plans when something else strikes our fancy in a much more short-term way. So we're trying to lose weight, but there's a chocolate cake that looks really nice, and we go ahead and eat it. Or we're trying to get better grades, but a new video game comes out, and we just can't help ourselves. So we have all of the ancestral mechanisms that we share with other species that allow us to take advantage of short-term reward. And then we have some special mechanisms of our own that allow us to project into the future, but they're often in contradiction. They don't necessarily work that well together. The future-oriented system doesn't really have the steering wheel. The steering wheel is still sort of controlled by our ancestral systems, and it's a challenge to get to sort of persuade your short-term systems to do the things that the long-term system would say are worthwhile. So people go back and forth. They make these grand plans, and they fail to do them. Homer Simpson's line, "Oh," is probably like, that is what it is to be human, is to be able to say that.
I think procrastination is a fascinating example, because it seems to me that when you're procrastinating, you're often doing it in full knowledge that you're doing something you shouldn't be. So it's not even like the chagrin comes retrospectively and you think, oh, well, I really shouldn't have been.
The chagrin is right now.
It's right now, and it's simultaneous. So it's like the two systems are kind of vying at the same time, and you're aware of it, but you're still yielding to the ancestral system. I mean, is procrastination a particularly interesting case to sort of to think through? Do you think?
Yeah, I talk about it a bit in the book. I think it's a fascinating case, and I struggle with it myself. Part of the message for the book is that you try to understand your own limits so that you can deal with them. And I think in some ways that's helped me deal a bit with procrastination, but it's very deeply seated in how the brain evolved, in this split between these older systems and these new systems that are just put on top. So this is where the Kluge and kind of duct tape metaphor helps. The problem is the new systems were just thrown on top sort of willy-nilly and without, any advanced thought, because evolution doesn't have advanced thought about how you'd integrate these two. It'd be like you're adding this, supercharger to your car, but forgetting to wire it in or something like that.
I wondered if you had any tips for the procrastinator, because you said you'd grappled with it yourself.
The first thing is to really be self-aware of it and say, why am I doing this? This really is going to make me unhappy later. I think the first step in coping with a lot of the limitations of the human mind is to have a heightened level of self-awareness and to really ask yourself, why am I doing this? I think procrastination is so deep that we can't really get rid of it, but we can at least keep an eye on it and sometimes say, you know what, this really isn't a good idea. I know it's fun now, but it really isn't. But procrastination is born of the sort of conflict between having something fun that's short-term and something really aversive that's long-term. So you really don't want to write that grant proposal, if you're me. And so you sit around, organizing your article collection or something, which is really not that important. But you get a little short-term reward for organizing the article collection because, your office is a little bit neater and you feel like you've done something.
Yes.
But getting something done isn't the same thing as feeling that you've done something. Being aware of that can help a little bit.
Let me ask you finally, Gary, do you think kluginess is intrinsic and eternally a part of the human condition? I was wondering if you try to imagine a kludge-free human being, isn't it rather scary and robotic?
I think a lot of people would find it scary, and I'm not sure it will ever happen. I think that with genetic engineering techniques and so forth, we may see, 300 years from now or 150 years from now, human beings that don't have back pain because the spine has been re-engineered. You may find human beings that have much better memory. They don't, in the way that, like, my younger sister can't quite imagine what life was like before cell phones. There will be a generation of kids not that far from now who will be like, why couldn't you remember where your car was? Because they'll have brain chips or altered memory systems or something like that that'll just be much better at remembering simple individual bits of information. Because that's something we already know how to build in the computer world. We know how to build very good memory systems. Look at Google; it's amazing. And eventually, we'll be able to figure out how to integrate some of that stuff. I don't think human beings will ever want to give up emotion and the kind of pleasure systems that we have. So I don't think that we're going to completely change into robots, but I think better spines, better memories, things like that. People will be, as they say, down on that. They'll be happy see some improvements in at least some aspects of the mind.
But 300 years from now, we'll probably still be procrastinating.
We may. It might be that, there'll be a little chip and you can, set a dial and you can say, allow myself this much procrastination. It's okay if, once in a while I stop, I watch one of those old 20th century television programs because they're so cute, but I'll only allow myself to do it 20 minutes a day, and after that there'll be this annoying ring in my ear that'll keep me from doing it. So, we'd have more voluntary control over our involuntary control.